still hear the phantom squawk of a parrot, its voice a perfect mimicry of old Mrs. Henderson, asking if her Harold had remembered to lock the back gate. A conversation she'd had a week before she passed. A conversation no living soul in Briar Hollow Pet Care should have overheard. I took the overnight shift because the rent was due, and my art degree wasn't exactly paying the bills. The shop itself, a crumbling Victorian monstrosity leaning like a drunken sailor against an even older cemetery, in the fog-choked outskirts of Blackwood, New York, looked like something coughed up by a Gothic novel. They specialized in everything from grooming and exotic pet sales to the grimmer, quieter business of pet cremation. It was only after I'd accepted the job that Erin Wexley, the manager with a smile as bright and brittle as new ice, pointed to the laminated rules taped behind the counter. Rule 3. About not looking too closely at tomorrow's entries in the deceased pets database on the ancient, stubbornly flying computer. Particularly stuck with me. There was the last guy, a quiet kid named Sam, who'd apparently ignored the rule about what to do when the fish in the big display tank started spelling out names. They found him face down in the ornamental koi pond out back, his eyes wide and staring, his mouth full of algae, as if he'd been trying to deliver a message no one could decipher. My first night at Briar Hollow was a symphony of unsettling Ashnai. The air hung thick with the cloying scent of cheap disinfectant, kiln-dried pet dander, pine shavings, and something else. A faint, cold, loamy smell, like disturbed earth and lilies, just past their prime. The silence was a living thing, broken only by the rustle of unseen creatures in their cages, the gurgle and hum of aquarium filters, and the occasional mournful creak of the ancient building settling around me. Erin Wexley had been all Polish and professional kindness during my brief orientation. She was in her early 40s, hair perfectly coiffed, her movements precise and efficient. She'd walked me through the surprisingly extensive back rooms, the grooming stations, the boarding kennels, the stark, quiet cremation chamber with its heavy steel door. Then, almost as an afterthought, back at the front counter, she tapped a perfectly manicured nail on the laminated sheet. Always check the bird cages twice before leaving. Sometimes the ghost parrots repeat conversations from deceased owners. If the fish in the aquarium start swimming in perfect formation spelling out words, close the store immediately. When you realize the deceased pets section in your client database keeps adding new entries by itself with tomorrow's dates, you've become death's appointment scheduler for beloved companions. Just a few little Briar Hollow quirks, Jamie, she'd said, her smile unwavering. Every old place has its traditions. You'll get the hang of it. Her reassurance felt as thin as the peeling paint on the shop's facade. My duties were simple. Clean cages, restock shelves, keep an eye on the boarded animals, and handle any late-night emergencies or cremains pickups. The first few hours passed in a blur of mundane tasks. Then, around 2 a.m., as I was sweeping the aviary section, a hoarse whisper came from a large, covered cage in the corner. "Harold? Is that you, dear? Did you bring the biscuits?" The voice was reedy, unmistakably elderly, and male. I froze. The tag on the cage read, "Sunshine, African Gray, deceased owner, Martha Pringle." Martha Pringle had been a woman. Harold, I'd later find out from a faded newspaper clipping in the staff room, was her husband, who'd passed 5 years before her. Later, as I was making my final rounds, I noticed the old computer in the small, cluttered back office. It was a relic, beige and blocky, its screen dark. Erin had said it was just for outdated inventory records. No internet connection, rarely used. As I passed, the screen flickered on, unbidden. A swirling kaleidoscope of what looked like multicolored paw prints danced across the monitor for a few seconds. Then it went black again, leaving me in the sudden, deeper silence, the scent of lilies suddenly stronger. The rhythm of the night shift at Briar Hollow began to seep into my bones. A slow, creeping chill, that had little to do with the shop's ancient, rattling heating system. After the customers and day staff left, the place transformed. The shadows in the aisles seemed to stretch and deepen, and the soft rustlings and chirps of the animals took on an almost conversational quality, as if they were sharing secrets just beyond my human understanding. Rule 1 became a nightly ritual, a source of both fascination and dread. Before locking up, I'd meticulously check each birdcage, not just once, but twice. It was during one of these checks, in my first week, that Sunshine, Mrs. Pringle's African gray, truly unnerved me. The cage was covered, the bird usually silent after lights out. As I did my second pass, it began to speak, not in its usual squawks, but in a perfect frail imitation of Martha Pringle's voice. "Harold, you left the back gate open again, you silly old coot," the parrot declared, its tone affectionate but scolding. "The wind's going to rattle it all night." A pause, then, in a higher, more anxious pitch, "He's at the gate." "Martha! Harold's at the gate." "Oh dear, he looks so pale." The bird then let out a series of frantic, panicked squawks before falling completely silent, refusing to utter another sound despite my coaxing. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. The back gate of the Pringle property, according to the brief death notice I'd found, had indeed been found swinging open the morning Martha was discovered. Miguel Mix Alvarez, a part-time vet tech student who covered occasional late-night animal emergencies and helped with the more sensitive boarders, the ones who apparently didn't like strangers, became a reluctant sounding board. Mix was a whirlwind of nervous energy, sarcasm, and surprisingly deep knowledge about local law. "This place, man," he said one night, helping me wrestle a surprisingly strong and very agitated Great Dane into a kennel. "It's got more stories than a Stephen King box set. And trust me, most of AIM ain't got happy endings." He glanced nervously towards the older sections of the shop, towards the back rooms where the cremation services were handled. "Some animals, they don't like to leave. And some owners, they don't like to let him go." One morning, just as the sun was beginning to dilute the oppressive darkness, I was mopping the main aisle. The shop was silent, the animals finally settled. As I passed the display of elaborate pet urns and memorial plaques, I saw it. A single, small, perfectly formed wet paw print on the freshly mopped, still damp linoleum. It was leading away from the urns, as if something tiny and four-legged had just taken a stroll. There were no animals loose. I checked. The print was already starting to evaporate, leaving behind only a faint, cold spot on the floor. The unease in Briar Hollow was a living entity, growing with each passing night. The lights in the aquarium section began to flicker with an unnerving regularity, sometimes casting a sickly green glow over the silent, watching fish. I started hearing faint scratching sounds from within the walls, tiny, insistent claws that seemed to be trying to get in or out. Rule 2 manifested itself on a rainy Tuesday night. I was methodically topping up the automatic fish feeders when the angelfish in the large 50-gallon display tank, a dozen of them, usually darting and weaving in a silver, uncoordinated ballet, suddenly stopped. They froze mid-water. Then, with a chilling, almost military precision, they moved. Their sleek, silver bodies glinted under the flickering fluorescent lights, as they formed a single, unmistakable word against the dark green backdrop of waving plastic plants. Soon, my breath hitched. The word hung there for a long, terrible moment. Then, as if a silent command had been given, the fish scattered, resuming their normal, chaotic swimming. My heart was hammering against my ribs. If the fish in the aquarium start swimming in perfect formation, spelling out words, close the store immediately. Before I could even process the absurdity, the sheer impossibility of it, the main shop phone, an ancient rotary model that usually only rang with telemarketers, shrieked to life. I snatched it up. "Briar Hollow Pet Care, Jamie speaking." "Oh, thank God." A woman's voice sobbed on the other end. It's Mittens, my cat. She was fine this morning. And now, she's not breathing. Mittens. Soon, I mumbled something about a sudden plumbing emergency, a burst pipe, water everywhere, and told the distraught woman I had to close the store immediately, but would leave emergency vet numbers on the answering machine. I locked the doors, my hands shaking. The image of those silver, prophetic fish burned into my retinas. Tess Bernard came into the shop the following afternoon, her eyes red-rimmed and swollen. She was a quiet woman in her early 30s, her face etched with a profound, raw grief. She was there to pick up the ashes of her dog, Buster, a golden retriever who had died suddenly a few days prior. It was so quick, she whispered, her voice barely audible. He was fine. Then he just laid down. He kept whining at my computer screen the night before, like he was trying to tell me something. Later that night, driven by a morbid curiosity I couldn't suppress, I decided to tackle the ancient offline computer in the back office. It whirred to life with a reluctant groan. The deceased pets database was a clunky, archaic program, but it was functional. I found Buster Bernard's entry easily enough, logged correctly with his date of passing. I scrolled idly through the list, a grim litany of beloved companions. Then I froze. Several new entries had appeared at the bottom of the list. Names I didn't recognize. Whiskers O'Malley, Captain Flint, Princess Penelope. Beside each name, in the date of departure column, was tomorrow's date. My stomach twisted. A glitch. It had to be a glitch. A system error in a machine older than I was. But as I stared at the screen, the faint cold scent of lilies and damp earth seemed to intensify around me. One of the ghost parrots in the aviary, a normally quiet macaw named Patches, suddenly let out a perfect imitation of a dog's joyful, boisterous bark. It yipped twice, then abruptly switched to a terrified, high-pitched whimpering cry, a sound that made the hairs on my arms stand on end. It was followed, a moment later, by a soft, cold, sibilant whisper that seemed to emanate from the computer's speakers, even though they were unplugged. Hush now, little one. It's time to collect. The glitch in the deceased pet's database was no glitch. Over the next few days, I found myself grimly, compulsively checking the local online pet obituaries, scanning the community forums, listening with a new, horrified attention whenever Miggs recounted a particularly sad late-night emergency call. Whiskers O'Malley, a ginger tabby from Elm Street. Captain Flint, an ancient, one-eyed iguana from Miller's End. Princess Penelope, a fluffy white Pomeranian from Chestnut Avenue, each one departing on the exact date predicted by that infernal offline computer. Rule 3 wasn't a guideline. It was a horrifying pre-written obituary column. I was, it seemed, death's unwilling appointment scheduler. Erin Bexley's placid calm began to feel less like professional composure and more like a carefully constructed mask, her knowledge of which pets were ailing or nearing their time was uncanny, delivered with a gentle, sympathetic sigh that now sounded chillingly like a preemptive eulogy. She'd subtly guide grieving owners towards the most expensive cremation urns, the most elaborate memorial plaques, her eyes holding a faint, unreadable gleam. Her private phone calls, taken in hushed tones in the back office, became more frequent. The presence of something else in the shop, something unseen but deeply felt, grew stronger. The lights in the aquarium section would not just flicker now, but sometimes dim entirely when I was near the old computer, then flare back to life with an angry buzz. I'd catch fleeting glimpses of movement reflected in the dark glass of a fish tank. A tall, shadowy figure, wearing what looked like a crude, misshapen mask, its eyes seeming to shift, to mimic the iridescent scales of the tetras, then the multifaceted gaze of a tarantula in its terrarium. The scent of damp earth and formaldehyde, usually confined to the cremation prep room, would sometimes waft through the main shop, even when no departures were scheduled. The collector, as the old whispers in the staff room called it, Tess Bernard returned, looking even more haunted than before. "It's Buster," she said, her voice trembling. "My home computer. It's been showing pictures of him. Just for a second. Then they're gone. And last night, I swear, Jamie, I heard his old collar jingle in the hallway." She clutched a sheaf of papers. "I was going through his old vet records from here, from when he was a puppy. There's a note. A preemptive grief counseling session scheduled. Dated 2 weeks before he even got sick. Erin Wexley signed it. My blood ran cold. Well, preemptive grief counseling. That night, Miggs, his usual sarcasm replaced by a grudging, fearful curiosity, helped me try to delve deeper into the haunted computer. He knew more about old systems than I did. After an hour of navigating cryptic command prompts and hidden directories, he found it. An old archived partition, a secondary log file. It showed the original deceased pet's entries, and then tracked changes, manual edits, slight alterations to dates, subtle changes in pet descriptions, occasionally an owner's address corrected, and some entries. Some animals known in the community for suffering abuse or severe neglect at the hands of their owners. Their date of departure had been moved up. Erin Wexley's admin password was the only one that could access these override functions. She wasn't just predicting death, she was in some cases curating it. As Miggs scrolled through the damning evidence, Erin Wexley's personal office computer, visible through the slightly ajar office door, screensaver activated. It wasn't the usual flying toasters. For a fleeting instant, before the image was quickly replaced by a serene photo of a field of wildflowers, I saw it. A complex, astrological-looking chart, animal silhouettes, a dog, a cat, a bird, superimposed over what looked like celestial alignments, and in the center of the chart, a single, glowing date, tomorrow's. The air around Erin's closed door suddenly felt 10 degrees colder, charged with a silent, unseen energy. The relative quiet of Briar Hollow shattered. It began subtly with the animals. The boarded dogs whined incessantly, a low, mournful chorus that vibrated through the floorboards. The cats, usually aloof, huddled together in the corners of their kennels, their eyes wide and dilated, fixed on some unseen point in the shadows. But it was the birds that heralded the true shift. One by one, every parrot, cockatoo, and macaw in the aviary began to speak. Not their usual squawks or mimicked phrases, but a cacophony of distinct, overlapping voices. Men, women, children, all speaking at once. It was a tidal wave of last words, of hushed goodbyes, of desperate pleas and confused questions. "Don't go, Fluffy. Who's a good boy? Who's a good boy? It's so dark, Mama. I'll see you at the bridge." The air thrummed with 1,000 unsent messages, 1,000 lingering farewells. Then the fish. Not just one tank, but all of them. The guppies, the tetras, the angelfish, even the normally placid goldfish, moved with a frantic, unnatural unison. Against the glass of their illuminated prisons, they formed a chilling, flickering tapestry of words. "He sees you. Run. Run." Erin knows. Not pets only. The last message sent a sliver of ice down my spine. Paw prints, small and glowing faintly, with a sickly green luminescence, began to appear on the walls, on the ceiling, leading from the cremation urn display towards the back office, towards the cursed computer. The scent of damp earth and formaldehyde was overpowering now, mixed with the sharp, metallic tang of fear. The collector was stirring. It was hungry. And then I saw it on the flickering screen of the deceased pet's database. A new entry, freshly typed, its date of departure listed for tomorrow. My own beloved aging tabby cat, Mittens, who was back at my small apartment, supposedly safe. My heart hammered against my ribs. This wasn't just a job anymore. This was personal. This was a threat. Miggs, who'd come in early looking even more pale and jittery than usual, saw the entry over my shoulder. Jamie. No. His voice was a choked whisper. He'd been doing some grim research of his own. Some of those natural causes deaths Erin handled recently. The ones for the pets of those people she disapproved of. I pulled some old tissue samples from the biohazard disposal. Found traces of ethylene glycol in 2 of them. Sweet, untraceable, looks like kidney failure. And old Mr. Abernathy's prize-winning poodle? A massive dose of a sedative that would mimic cardiac arrest in an older dog. He looked at me, his eyes wide with dawning horror. She's not just predicting, Jamie. She's arranging. The pieces slammed together with sickening force. Erin's uncanny knowledge, her curated grief, her judgments. We had to confront her. Now, we found her in the main showroom, calmly polishing a display of ornate pet caskets, a serene smile on her face, the cacophony from the aviary, the frantic messages in the fish tanks, seemed not to bother her in the slightest. Erin, I began, my voice trembling despite my effort to keep it steady. We need to talk about the computer these departures. Her smile didn't falter, but her eyes, when she turned to us, were as cold and flat as river stones. Ah, yes. The database. A wonderfully efficient tool. Wouldn't you agree? Helps us prepare. Helps the families transition. Prepare them by killing their pets. Miggs blurted out, his usual sarcasm replaced by raw anger. By targeting people you don't like. Erin chuckled, a low, melodious sound that sent shivers down my spine. Dead years, my, such harsh accusations. I merely facilitate this place, Briar Hollow. It stands on sacred ground, a liminal space where the veil between worlds is thin. My ancestors understood this. They made a pact long ago. We are the keepers of the passage. We ensure the smooth transition of beloved companions. Her gaze flickered towards the back office. And in return, the collector rewards our diligence. Rewards you? I said, my voice tight. With what? I said, my voice tight. The ability to play God. To decide who grieves next. I gestured to the computer screen. Visible through the office doorway. My cat's name a damning accusation. Mittens. Why her? Erin's smile finally took on a sharper, more predatory edge. Oh, Jamie. You've become inconvenient. Too curious. The collector appreciates a tidy transition. A certain flavor of grief. Yours, I imagine, will be particularly potent. And your delightful tabby? A small offering to ensure the continued blessings. Youth. Vitality. The ability to see the threads of fate before they're fully woven. A small price to pay, wouldn't you agree? As she spoke, the lights in the shop flickered violently, then plunged into near darkness, save for the eerie shifting glow from the aquariums and the faint green luminescence of the paw prints. Now converging on the back office door, the temperature dropped 20 degrees. From the shadows near the exotic reptile enclosures, a figure began to coalesce. Tall, gaunt, wearing a crude, ill-fitting mask that looked disturbingly like stretched, taxidermy dog skin. It seems crudely stitched. And its eyes. They shifted, flickered. One moment the multifaceted gleam of an insect, the next the cold, reptilian slit of a snake, then the warm, familiar brown of a beloved Labrador, before settling on a pair of luminous, inhumanly intelligent cat's eyes that seemed to stare directly into my soul. The collector. It raised a long, pale hand, its fingers tipped with what looked like sharpened animal claws. A low, guttural chittering sound emanated from it, a sound that resonated deep in my chest, primal and terrifying. It moved towards me, its gait a jerky, unnatural shuffle. "It seems," Erin said, her voice laced with a terrifying, triumphant satisfaction. "Your appointment has been moved up, Jamie." Miggs yelled something, a wordless cry of defiance, and threw a heavy bag of premium dog kibble at the collector. It struck the entity with a dull thud, making it recoil for a split second, its chittering rising in pitch. "The computer!" Tess Bernard's voice suddenly cut through the chaos. She stood in the shop's open doorway, drawn by the escalating madness, or perhaps by Buster's lingering spirit. Her face pale but determined, she held up her smartphone, its screen displaying a complex network diagram. "Buster, he showed me the shop's old server. It's not just offline. Erin networked it through the building's original, shielded electrical conduits. It's acting as a spiritual amplifier, a beacon for it." Erin's eyes widened, her composure finally cracking. "You're meddling, little." The collector, recovering, lunged again. Not at me this time, but towards Erin, its chittering taking on a hungry, almost eager tone. It seemed her pact had a price for failure, for exposure. A desperate battle erupted in the heart of the haunted pet shop. The air filled with the screech of terrified birds, the frantic splashing of prophetic fish, the guttural snarls of the collector, and Erin's panicked screams. The paw prints on the walls glowed brighter, pulsing in time with the entity's movements, as if the very shop were its extended nervous system. We were trapped in a feeding frenzy, and it was no longer clear who, or what, was truly on the menu. The collector, its dogskin mask a grotesque mockery of companionship, moved with an unnatural skittering speed. Erin Bexley, no longer the serene manager but a cornered animal, shrieked as one of its claw-tipped hands lashed out, tearing a strip from her pristine uniform. The scent of her fear, sharp and acrid, seemed to further energize the entity. "The conduits!" Tess yelled, her voice cutting through the cacophony. She was already moving towards the main breaker panel near the back office, her phone still clutched in her hand, displaying its glowing network schematic. "If we can cut the power to that specific circuit, it might disrupt the amplification." Miggs, ever the pragmatist even in the face of abject terror, grabbed a heavy metal dog scoop. "Keep it off her, Jamie," he shouted, positioning himself between me and the advancing collector, which was now torn between its original target and the new, more immediate threat of its failing high priestess. The ghost parrots in the aviary shrieked in the unified, deafening chorus. But now, woven into their panicked squawks, were distinct, clear words. Erin's voice, amplified, distorted, echoing through the shop, from shadowed earth and silent stone. "Wine, call thee guardian of the bone." From whispered wish and tearful plea, "I bind thy hunger unto me." It was an incantation, the words of her pact, now turned against her by the very spirits she'd sought to control. "I know and all now." The collector paused, its shifting eyes fixing on Erin with a new, terrible focus. It chittered, a sound like 1,000 tiny bones rattling together. And then it spoke, its voice a horrifying chorus of every pet that had ever passed through Briar Hollow. Barks, meows, chirps, hisses, all blended, guttural pronouncement. "The pact is hungry." The keeper falters. Erin screamed, a raw primal sound, as the collector lunged, its claws extended. But before it could reach her, a flash of silver light erupted from the largest aquarium. The fish, no longer spelling words but glowing with an intense collective luminescence, shot towards the entity like a school of living bullets. They struck the collector, and it recoiled, hissing, its form flickering, the dogskin mask seeming to loosen, revealing a glimpse of something swirling and nebulous beneath. "Now, Tess!" I yelled. Tess reached the breaker panel, her hands fumbling with the rusted latches. With a grunt, she threw the main switch for the old, shielded conduit Erin had used. The effect was instantaneous. The eerie green glow of the paw prints on the walls winked out. The collector shrieked, a sound that was pure, tearing static, its form convulsing, its shifting eyes losing their focus. The old computer in the back office, which had been humming with an almost palpable energy, sparked violently and went dark with a final mournful sizzle. The chorus of voices from the aviary died down to confused individual squawks. The collector, weakened, disoriented, its connection to its power source severed, began to fade, its form becoming translucent, its chittering growing fainter. It fixed its gaze on Erin one last time, a look of profound cold hunger in its mismatched eyes. Then, with a final sighing whisper that sounded like a rustle of dry leaves and evaporating mist, it was gone. Erin Vexley lay slumped against a display of premium catnip toys, her face pale, her eyes wide with terror and disbelief. Her youth, her vitality, seemed to be draining away before our eyes, lines appearing around her mouth and eyes, her perfectly coiffed hair looking suddenly dull and lifeless. The pact had been broken, and the price was being exacted. Miggs lowered the dog's scoop, his breathing ragged. Tess leaned against the wall, shaking. I looked around the chaotic, suddenly silent shop. The animals were quiet, a watchful, exhausted stillness having fallen over them. The immediate, intense supernatural pressure had lifted, leaving behind a profound sense of violation and a lingering, icy dread. We didn't call the police. The story was too insane, the evidence too ephemeral. Erin Vexley, when she finally found her voice, was a babbling wreck, speaking of ancient guardians, broken bargains, and the endless hunger of the void. We helped her to her car, a woman who had aged 20 years in 20 minutes. She drove away without a backward glance, disappearing into the pre-dawn fog, a ghost of her former self. In the back office, the old computer was dead, a faint smell of burnt circuits hanging in the air. The deceased pet's database, with its chillingly accurate predictions, was gone. But as I stood there, I noticed one of the older, dustier cremation urns on a high shelf begin to rattle gently. From within, I heard a faint, happy bark, followed by the soft jingling of a collar. Buster, letting Tess know he was finally, truly, at peace. The weeks following that night were a blur of cleaning up, both literally and metaphorically. Briar Hollow Pet Care, stripped of its dark conduit and its malevolent human manipulator, felt lighter, quieter. The oppressive atmosphere had lifted, replaced by a weary sort of peace. Miggs and I, with Tess's occasional, hesitant help, kept the shop running. The ghost parrot still sometimes whispered fragments of old conversations, but they were softer now, more like faded memories than urgent pronouncements. The fish swam in normal, chaotic patterns, their silent prophecies apparently concluded. The paw prints on the walls never reappeared. We found Erin Vexley's hidden ledgers, detailing her family's generations-long pact with whatever the collector truly was. An ancient, elemental force of grief and transition, anchored to this specific piece of land, this liminal space between worlds. Her ancestors had sought to control it, to bargain with it. Erin, in her arrogance, had tried to weaponize it, to twist its purpose for her own gain. She'd paid the price. There was no sign of the larger cult, no shadowy pharmaceutical network. It seemed Erin's family had been solitary practitioners, their dark secret kept within the crumbling walls of Briar Hollow. The deceased pet's database remained offline, a dead relic. But sometimes, when a particularly beloved animal in our care was nearing its end, I'd find a small, comforting sign, a favorite toy appearing inexplicably by its side, a faint, familiar scent lingering in the air, a single, soft feather resting on its bed. The shop, it seemed, was still a way station, but a gentler one now. Its role shifted from a place of harvested grief to one of peaceful passage. Tess became a regular volunteer. Her quiet presence was a comfort to the animals, and to us. She said Buster still visited her in dreams sometimes, no longer whining at computer screens, but running free in a sunlit field, waiting patiently. Mix, his sarcasm softened by a newfound respect for the unseen, delved deeper into his veterinary studies, occasionally bringing in arcane texts on animal spirits and ancient healing rituals had found in dusty university archives. You know, he said one evening, looking around the quiet shop, for a haunted pet emporium run by a couple of traumatized night shifters, we're not doing too bad. I had to agree. The fear hadn't entirely vanished. I still checked the bird cages twice. I still eyed the fish tanks with a certain wariness. And every time I booted up a computer, any computer, I felt a faint prickle of unease. But it was different now. The dread was tempered with a sense of responsibility, of stewardship. One morning as the sun rose, painting the old cemetery next door in hues of gold and rose, a new customer came in. An elderly woman clutching a small, fluffy white kitten. I just adopted him, she said, her eyes shining. He needs his first checkup. And a name. I was thinking, Lucky. I looked at the kitten, purring in her arms, its eyes bright with new life. Lucky. It seemed appropriate. Briar Hollow was still a place where the veil was thin. The quiet rustling in the cages, the soft sigh of the wind through the ancient eaves, the faint scent of lilies and old memories. They were all still there, but now they felt less like a threat and more like a gentle reminder that love and loyalty and the bond between a soul and its beloved companion could sometimes echo far beyond the sting of the last goodbye. And we were there, Miggs and I, the new, unwitting, but dedicated keepers of their vigil.